Singer 4AD Roadster by Heumann 1955. The best research often has nothing to do with effort or expertise. It often happens to just be plain old-fashioned luck. That's what happened to me when I was first contacted by Jules Heumann about a year ago concerning a beautiful special he built back in the mid-1950s. Jules was just 28 years old in 1952 when he started his project based on a 1952 Singer 4AD Roadster. He wanted a sports car, but there was little choice in his price range, and few sports cars to choose from, so he did what a special few enterprising young men did back then: he built it from scratch. Jules was like many young men of the era. He wanted a sports car and he wanted something unique. 1952 to 1955 was the golden era of fiberglass sports cars, and Jules subscribed to Road and Track and no doubt read other publications as well. You couldn't miss the number of custom-built specials seen in those magazines back then, and like many guys from then, he chose to build it himself. When someone in the 1950s decided to build themselves a car, they could choose to purchase an already built body by Glass Power, Victress, Allied or other company. Or they could build it themselves. Jules took the middle ground. More about that later. Of course, few people realize that the average time it took to build a sports car back then was approximately 2,000 hours. That is, after you purchased your new fiberglass body and started from there. But Jules was braver than most and decided to design and build a body himself. This took him on a nearly 4-year trek, modifying a chassis, creating a body, assembling it and finishing it off. Total time just 3,000 hours. And that was working after hours from his full-time job, to boot. We often think of the episode in 1955 on the You Asked It video, which showed how to build a sports car in 4 hours. There could be nothing further from the truth. The agreed upon estimate back in the 1950s was 2,000 hours to build one of these cars. That's a whole lot of sweat equity. A full-time 40-hour-a-week year for 52 weeks is 2,080 hours. If you put this in terms of an hourly rate today, let's say $50 an hour, which is pretty reasonable. A nicely built car from the 1950s would have taken 2,000 hours or approximately $100,000 worth of labor to build the car. And this was before buying part number 1. Jules estimated in an article back in 1958 that he spent 3,000 hours building his car, or in today's terms about $150,000 worth of labor. This was a feat that few would tackle in today's environment. Especially on his own and in his own garage, as Jules did back in 1950-1955. Jules bought the wrecked 1952 Singer 4AD Roadster for $250 from an insurance company as his starting point. It had less than 2,000 miles on it. He stripped and dumped the body, but kept the steering wheel, and little else other than the chassis and drivetrain. The car had a short wheelbase and small motor, and both were important to him. He wanted a sports car, but not one with so much power it would be dangerous to drive. His choice of chassis was interesting because it was not the only Singer base special built around that time. BMC of San Francisco, Kiehlkeval, was building a special that debuted in fiberglass in 1952, in the same area as Jules was building his car, and Singer in the UK debuted their first fiberglass-bodied sports car on the same SMX chassis in 1953, approximately 10 of these were made. Also, Glass Power worked with Von Singer Motors of Hollywood, California to produce a special that was ultimately displayed at a show in the Northeast. Shorted the Glass Power G2 body to fit. But none did it with the excellence of design, execution, and style as Jules did back then. The Singer Roadster was produced by the Singer Motor Company from 1939 through 1955, with the last model, the Singer 4AD Roadster, produced from 1951-1955. The 1952 Singer 4AD Roadster that Jules had chosen used a 48-horsepower engine. Jules crafted the intake manifold himself. He modified the existing intake from fitting a single downdraft SU and created an intake manifold that would accept 2 carbs, 1 3/4 SUs, same as the Jaguar from that period. The Motor magazine, UK, reported that the single-car version in 1951 had a top speed of 73 miles an hour. With its lighter fiberglass body, Jules' car most likely exceeded this figure to some extent because of additional carburation. The Singer was a good choice for a small car to build a special on. The body was easily removed from the chassis, and the chassis utilized independent coil spring front suspension, Lockheed-style drum brakes with 9-inch drums, remember. Small car here, and 4-speed gearbox with floor shifter. Those were some pretty nice features on a smaller type car. He started by moving the engine back and added a big cross brace to support the new engine location. He also dropped the engine by 2 3/4 inches. He still has the chassis drawing, 50 years later, and referenced the exact detail in conversation, so getting good info on his 1952 to 1955 build was fairly easy. He moved the rear springs from under the chassis to an outward position. Finally, he custom-made the exhaust manifold, one of his most difficult tasks, he shared with me. Jules made no changes to the wheelbase of the Singer chassis, it remained 91 inches. Next. What body to create? It just so happened he lived in the San Francisco Bay Area and came in contact with Vail Wright, who built the Vail sports cars in the 1952-1953 era that was a near copy of the 1948 Sicilia 202 Nuvolari Spider.